Introduction: the dissecting table. The ordinary human being walks toward the twilight of their life, trembling with blind panic. In front of the mirror, they observe with clinical terror how the skin withers, how cartilage wears down, how bones lose their former density, and how the vigor of muscles slowly dissolves in the relentless acid of time. We are being misled. We have been taught to weep for the decay of the flesh and to mourn the increasingly fatigued beat of the heart. We have been convinced that aging is an irreparable biological tragedy, an inexorable sentence from which we must flee using bitter nostalgia and sterile laments. But the physical body is a simple and fragile clay container. The true tragedy of old age, the only truly mortal and humiliating disease that ravages humanity in its final years, is not the deep wrinkle that furrows the face, nor the trembling in the hands. The supreme tragedy is the rotting of character. It is reaching the threshold of the grave with a spirit infected by fear. It is a slow death. It is reaching the end with blood clogged by the cholesterol of historical resentment and lungs suffocated by the pathetic need to receive the applause of fools. The time has come to stop pitying your years and your pains. You hold in your hands a text that was not conceived to stroke your ego or to offer you cheap comfort. I invite you, with the aseptic and meticulous coldness of a surgeon wielding a scalpel before necrotic tissue, to voluntarily lie down on the icy and metallic dissecting table of your own conscience. Leave at the door of this operating room the lukewarm illusions of youth and the cowardly excuses of age. There is no room here for mercy. Under the raw, white, and inclement light of anatomical truth, there is no space for self-pity. Anatomy of the Eternal is a surgical manual designed exclusively for the mature soul. Throughout these pages, we will make deep, precise, and painful incisions into the diseased organs of your daily behavior. It is a mandatory procedure. We will amputate, without the slightest moral anesthesia, the useless attachments that keep you chained to dead people and eras. We will root out the tumor of vanity and drain every drop of blood intoxicated by the fear of solitude and the judgment of others. We will operate on your emotional skeleton until there is no softness left. The purpose of this intervention is not to destroy you, but to transmute you. We are going to forge within your ribcage a spiritual organism so dense, so impenetrable, and so majestically heavy that when biological death finally approaches to claim your remains, it will break its teeth trying to bite your legacy. This is your tuning. You are about to learn to suture your wounds with the thread of silence and to beat with the unshakable slowness of the mountains. Take a deep breath and fix your gaze on the ceiling. Prepare yourself for the coldness of the steel. The incision begins now. Do not flinch. The old man is dying so the sovereign can finally be born. Chapter 1. The skeleton of habit, the structure. If we open the human anatomy and strip the body of its skin, its fat, and the pulsating network of its muscles and arteries, we find ourselves before the primary architecture of existence, the skeleton. Bone is biology's response to the Earth's gravity. It is the support structure, the rigid but articulated frame that allows us to stand. It allows us to stand upon the mud, walk against the wind, and sustain the weight of our own cranial vault. Without the skeleton, we would be nothing more than a shapeless mass of flesh spilled upon the ground, incapable of offering resistance to the world. The design of living bone is a masterpiece of natural engineering. Although at first glance it seems like an inert stone, the bone of a man in the prime of his strength is a dynamic, porous tissue, flexible in just the right measure, capable of absorbing impacts and remodeling itself according to the loads to which it is subjected. However, as the biological clock advances, a phenomenon occurs. If the body stops moving, if it stops facing resistance and weight, the bone loses its flexibility. It overcalcifies. It becomes porous inside but rigidly brittle outside. Before the slightest blow, before an insignificant stumble that in youth would have barely left a bruise, the elderly bone shatters into splinters. This anatomical tragedy has an exact and symmetrical reflection in the human spirit. To this pathology of character, to this calcification of the soul that destroys the majesty of mature age, we shall name the skeleton of habit. Observe closely the behavior of the vast majority of those who have crossed the threshold of age. Terrified by the loss of their physical vigor and by the incomprehensible speed at which the outside world changes, these individuals develop a paralyzing phobia of the unknown. They feel life slipping through their hands, and in a desperate and pathetic attempt to regain control, they build around themselves a cage of routines. The elder, sick with habit, clings to his schedules with the ferocity of a castaway clinging to a board. He eats breakfast at exactly the same time, from the same cup, sitting in the same chair. He walks the same streets, repeats the same worn anecdotes, and holds the same chronic complaints about the state of the world. He convinces himself that the incessant repetition of these actions is synonymous with peace. He has confused stability, which is the ability to remain upright in the face of chaos, with paralysis, which is the terror of moving. The skeleton of habit is a deeply diseased tissue because it is based on a deadly illusion. It is the illusion that we can stop time if we freeze our environment. What is the definitive symptom of this disease? Extreme fragility. When a man's structure depends on the outside world not changing, that man has become a piece of glass. It is enough for one day that his favorite chair is occupied or that dinner is delayed. His peace of mind is as brittle as a femur with osteoporosis. A simple brush with the unforeseen fractures his good mood for the rest of the week. This spiritual rigidity not only humiliates the elder, but tyrannizes his lineage. The family of the calcified individual is forced to walk on eggshells around him. Children and grandchildren do not respect him for his wisdom. They avoid him for his fragility. They modify their own lives so as not to upset grandfather, treating him not as a sovereign patriarch, but as a time bomb or a terminal patient to whom bad news cannot be given. This is the greatest insult a human being can receive. It is the clinical confirmation that the world considers him too weak to endure the friction of reality. The individual who has allowed habit to petrify his soul lives in a state of anticipated rigor mortis. He has built his skeleton not with the immutable principles of honor and rectitude, but with the cheap calcium of whims. His world has shrunk to the size of the room where he spends his hours, and his authority has been reduced to the ability to complain when someone moves an object from its place. If you wish to reach the eternity of character, you must subject this diseased structure to the inclement cold of surgical steel. 'Tis the incision, the necessary cut. In the raw trade of traumatology and orthopedic surgery, there is a brutal truth that scares weak hearts, but saves the lives of the brave. When a bone has fractured and healed in a bad position, welding crooked and causing chronic pain and a limp, medicine cannot cure it with ointments, bandages, or words of encouragement. The only way to return the limb to its original rectitude and vital function is through a sadistic but deeply compassionate intervention. The surgeon must take a chisel, a surgical hammer, and break the bone again. He must intentionally fracture the defective ossification, piercing through acute pain, to align the structure. This allows it to heal this time under the perfect geometry of nature. This is the incision that you must execute upon the skeleton of habit. You yourself must be both the surgeon and the patient. You must take the hammer of your will and deliberately break the calcified routines that keep you prisoner of your fragility. The act of breaking habit is an undeniable biological and psychological agony. Your nervous system, domesticated by decades of anesthetic repetition, will scream in pain and panic. Your brain, addicted to the safety of the usual chair and the usual conversation, will beg you not to alter the order. It will tell you that at your age you no longer have to endure discomforts, that rest is your right, and that the outside world is too aggressive for you. You must ignore that diagnosis of cowardice. The pain you will feel when breaking your routine is not the pain of decay. It is the burning pain of the soul's ligaments. They are stretching to regain their ancient flexibility. It is the pain of resurrection. How is this incision executed in the theater of your daily life? Through the voluntary imposition of controlled chaos and the tactical renunciation of your rights to comfort. If you demand absolute silence, break that bone. Allow the noise and force your mind to find calm, not in the environment, but in the exact center of your own chest. If you react with anger every time family plans are altered, apply the scalpel to that anger. When the unexpected occurs, Swallow your saliva, do not frown, and assume the change with coldness. Force yourself to smile inwardly at uncertainty, proving to your nervous system that you are not a hostage of the clock or of circumstances. You must subject your spirit to small fasts of habit. If you always give your opinion on your children's problems, fracture the neck of that habit and bite your tongue. Bite it until it bleeds before giving unsolicited advice. If you feel the biological need to complain about the pain in your joints upon waking up, extirpate that complaint from your vocal cords and rise in a deathly silence, enduring the weight of your own biology without asking the world for pity. To break the defective ossification of your character means voluntarily exposing yourself to the elements. It means dropping the crutches of predictability. The ordinary elder believes his strength lies in having everything under control. You will discover that true control belongs to the one who lets go. The one who stands in the middle of the gale of the unforeseen and discovers that he is still breathing, that he is still standing, and that the universe has not collapsed simply because his coffee cup has broken or his schedule has been delayed. This surgical process will purge you of weakness. Your relatives, accustomed to treating you like a porcelain figure that could not be contradicted, will be paralyzed seeing how you receive the alterations of fate with the imperturbability of a glacier. Respect is not demanded. Respect is earned by proving you are the toughest organism in the room. By breaking your own minor rules, by shattering the diseased tissue of your senile whims, you are cleaning the space within your flesh. You are preparing the anatomical ground for the definitive implant, for the forging of the only structure that has the power to defy the rot of the grave. 3. The eternal organ, the transmutation. Once the surgeon has swept away the debris of the calcified bone and the wound has been cleaned of all the infection of habit, the dissecting table becomes an anvil of alchemical transmutation. The empty space left by routine cannot remain empty, for the human being needs a structure not to collapse. This time, you will not rebuild your skeleton with the porous matter of worldly preferences or rigid schedules. You are going to forge and implant in your entrails a skeleton of moral titanium. In elite surgery, when a femur or a hip has disintegrated, medicine implants titanium prostheses. Titanium is a sacred metal for human anatomy. It is exceptionally light, yet immensely stronger than steel. It does not corrode, it does not rust, and most miraculous of all, it possesses the property of osseointegration. Living tissue does not reject it, but grows around it, fusing with the metal. This turns the flesh and the machine into a single, indissoluble, and eternal entity. The skeleton of moral titanium is the internal structure of immortal patriarchs. While the weak elder builds his structure based on what he does, the monarch builds his skeleton based exclusively on who he is. The ribs of your new architecture will not be formed by your tastes, but by your cardinal virtues. The vertebral column of your new skeleton will be unnegotiable honor. An honor that does not depend on the world treating you fairly, but on the brutal demand you impose upon yourself. You will keep your word. You will keep it not because others deserve it, but because the word of a monarch cannot bend without his own spine bending. The femur that will hold the weight of your body will be tactical silence. While the biomass dissolves in laments and useless chatter, the titanium of your silence will hold. It will hold the tons of pressure from family and social crises without emitting the slightest creak. You will walk with the density of lead, anchored to the earth, observing human tragedy without the pathetic need to add your own voice to the white noise. The skull protecting your mind will be rectitude. You will accept that physical decay and pain are the inescapable invoices of having lived. You will not ask for mercy from the heavens, nor will you blame your doctors. Your mind will be armored by the understanding that dignity is not lost when the body sickens. Dignity is only lost when the individual groans. When this skeleton of moral titanium is implanted and fused with your soul, the definitive transmutation occurs. You acquire the supreme and fearsome capacity for absolute external flexibility. It is a paradox that only the strong manage to understand. The elder with calcified bones is rigid outside. He is rigid because he is broken inside. He has no immutable principles, only whims, and so any external change terrifies him. But the monarch, who possesses an internal skeleton of moral titanium, can afford the majestic luxury of being absolutely flexible with everything external. He is unshakable. The monarch can sleep in a strange bed without complaining. He can sit at the head of the table or in the darkest corner, knowing the head of power is wherever he decides to sit. He can suffer the loss of material goods or the misunderstanding of his children, without his pulse accelerating a single beat. Why should the monarch care if dinner is served cold, if the house is noisy, or if modern times are a chaos of lost values? All that is scenery. The monarch walks through the ruins of the outside world and through the fire of his own circumstances with the immobility of an ancient god. He knows, with a cold and anatomical certainty, that the core that sustains him is not made of the temporary clay of habits. It is forged in the indestructible alloy of a will that has mastered the fear of the unforeseen. You have survived the decades. You have seen empires born and die. Do not dishonor the magnitude of your survival by locking yourself in the cage of a schedule or in the tyranny of your daily preferences. The skeleton of habit is the shroud of cowards who wait for death in a rocking chair. You have been called to the dissecting table for something much greater. Rise from the operating table. Feel the weight of titanium in your spine, in your knees, and in your chest. Go out into the chaos of the world and receive the unpredictable not with the startle of a slave, but with the dark, patient, and sovereign smile of the strongest organism in the entire ecosystem. You have extirpated the terror of alteration, and in the glorious vacuum that has remained in your chest, only the perfect and eternal mechanics of absolute power beat now. The structure is set, the bone is aligned. The monarch is ready to walk among the ruins without ever being broken again. Chapter 2. The Lung of Silence, the Breathing. If we descend one step further into the anatomy of the human being, leaving behind the hardness of the bone to enter the thoracic cavity, we find the bellows of existence, the respiratory system. The lungs are the exchange organ par excellence. They take in oxygen, the invisible breath of the world that feeds the blood and ignites metabolism. They also expel carbon dioxide, the toxic waste of internal wear and tear. Human life is measured, literally, between the first abrupt inhalation at birth and the last languid exhalation at death. But the lungs do not only manage air for cellular survival, they manage air for the creation of the verb. Without air, there is no voice. It is precisely in the management of this air where the ordinary individual, as they age, develops one of the most destructive pathologies, verbal hyperventilation. As years advance, the common human experiences a biological panic toward invisibility. They feel their physical strength diminish and feel that younger generations advance faster. Faced with this terror of being forgotten, the elder develops a diseased tissue. They try to compensate for the loss of physical weight by desperately increasing the volume of their words. Observe this tragedy at any Sunday table. The individual sick with verbal hyperventilation does not tolerate silence. They see it as social death. Therefore, they speak without ceasing. They exhaust the oxygen of the room, repeating the same anecdotes for the 1,000th time. They emit a constant stream of complaints about their joints, politics, and the weather. They distribute unsolicited advice to their children, trying to govern others through an inexhaustible bombardment. In medicine, hyperventilation is a rapid, shallow breath that unbalances gases in the blood. It paradoxically narrows the blood vessels to the brain, causing confusion and panic. Verbal hyperventilation produces the same suffocating effect in families. The elder believes they are reaffirming authority, but they are emptying the room. Relatives stop listening. They are physically present, but psychologically disconnected to protect themselves from the noise. They nod and wait with patience for the monologue to end. This is the deadly illusion, believing that making noise is synonymous with being alive and that emitting words is synonymous with having power. The result is the absolute loss of dignity. A king who speaks without ceasing becomes the jester of his own court. By wasting breath on trivial complaints, the value of his word crashes toward nothing. He becomes the acoustic equivalent of an old refrigerator, a constant annoying hum that everyone in the house has learned to ignore. To be a monarch, You must understand that respect is not earned by exhaling syllables into the wind. It is earned by mastering the superhuman capacity to retain air and deprive the world of your voice. You must learn that every word spoken without necessity is a leak in your fortress, a betrayal of your own internal density. 'Tis the incision, the necessary cut. To cure a patient suffering from chronic hyperventilation, a paramedic executes a counterintuitive maneuver. They place a paper bag over the mouth and nose. This forces the patient to breathe their own stagnant air, restricting the flow to force the brain to slow the rhythm. It is a controlled suffocation that saves the life. On the dissecting table of your character, you must apply this same suffocation upon your vanity. This surgical intervention is called the ligation of the ego. You must take a cold, implacable scalpel and cut the air supply that feeds your need to be heard. This incision is deep and it burns because it attacks your core. It means that the next time you are surrounded by family and feel the irrepressible urge to tell a glorious anecdote of your past to impress them, you will close your jaws with the strength of a steel trap. You will force yourself to swallow those words. You will feel how the anecdote fights to come out, scraping your cords. You will deny it that air. You will let the story die in the darkness of your throat. The incision demands methodical cruelty toward your impulses. If you see your adult child about to make a mistake that puts their pride at risk, not their life, the instinct will ask you to hyperventilate and sermonize. Cut that breath. Apply a tourniquet to your tongue. Bite your lips and force your lungs to inhale the silence. The pain you will feel is the ego being amputated without anesthesia. It is the biological panic of feeling that if you do not intervene, you are no longer necessary. You must face that pain head-on. You must accept the clinical truth of maturity. Your children do not need your words. They need to trip, fall, and bleed to learn their own lesson, just as you did. By depriving them of your warning, you are giving them the most brutal and necessary gift of nature, the consequences of their own actions and choices. Furthermore, the ligation must be applied to physical complaint. As the anatomy wears down, pain becomes a constant companion. But the monarch never uses oxygen to announce pain to the world. Complaining about a knee or back does not cure the joint. It infects the room with weakness and ruins the atmosphere. The incision demands that you metabolize your pain in absolute secrecy, closing your lips and proving that the flesh may be yielding, but the spirit is titanium. By forcing yourself to be silent when your body begs to speak, you stop wasting vital energy. The blood will stop fleeing to the tongue and return to the brain. Initially, this forced silence will feel like a punishment cell. But as the wound heals, you will discover that the restriction of air has not killed you. It has expanded your alveolar capacity to titanic proportions. It prepares the ground for the master organ, the one that does not react, but simply dominates. 3. The eternal organ, the transmutation. When hyperventilation has been eradicated and the vanity of the voice has been amputated, the space in the chest is occupied by a new physiological machinery. Your old lungs, fragile and reactive, transmute into the supreme organ of the monarch, the abyssal lung. This is the ultimate evolution of the breath. In the darkest and coldest depths of the oceans, where the water pressure would crush the steel of a commercial submarine, live the leviathans of nature. Massive whales do not breathe with the hysterical haste of small fish at the surface. The leviathan surfaces takes a single, slow, and monstrous breath of air. It fills lungs of colossal proportions, and with that single breath, it dives into the darkness for hours. Its heart slows its beats. Its metabolism enters a state of grace and absolute conservation. It does not waste a single molecule of oxygen on useless movements. It is the master of its own internal rhythm. The abyssal lung is the anatomical capacity of the sovereign elder to inhale the chaos of the surface and dive into the crushing weight of their own inner peace without a sound. With this eternal organ, your presence in the world changes. You no longer breathe to speak, you breathe to exist with density and mass. When you enter a room full of conflict or haste, your abyssal lung works. You inhale the air tainted by the hysteria of others. You take it into the depths of your chest. There, in the darkness of your experience, you filter that air. You eliminate the urgency, the static, and the fear with a cold precision. And then you exhale. But you do not exhale words. You exhale a heavy silence, dense and charged with gravity. This silence is not the absence of sound, but an overwhelming physical presence. The atmospheric pressure of the room changes instantly. People around you will feel that the air has become thicker. They will feel the weight of the oxygen you just expelled. Unconsciously, their nervous systems will react to the leviathan in the room. They will lower their voices. They will stop interrupting. Their own breathing will be forced, by biological sympathy, to match the tectonic slowness of your diaphragm and core. The monarch governs the ecosystem simply by breathing. Having the abyssal lung, when you finally decide to speak, the effect will be devastating. Since you have kept your voice under lock and key for days, when the vault opens, everyone will fall silent at once to hear what the stone person has to say. A single phrase, pronounced with the slowness and weight of the deep sea, will have more corrective force and more power to alter reality than 20 years of sermons. This is the true power of the verb. It is the weight of a mountain being released in a single sentence, crushing all the triviality around it. Do not fear being forgotten for being silent. The dead are forgotten, the charlatans are ignored, but the monarch who masters acoustic vacuum becomes the gravitational center of the family universe. People will seek your silence to refuge from their own storms. You become the pillar of air that holds the roof. Finish the operation. Rise from the table. Abandon forever the undignified panting of those who need attention. Breathe from your guts, expand your chest like an ancient mountain, and discover the inscrutable beauty of seeing the world bow before the man who has conquered the territory of having nothing to say. In this state, your silence is not a lack of content, but a surplus of power. You have become the master of the void, the one who does not need to fill the air because you are the air itself. The world will learn to respect your pause more than any shout, for in your silence lies the echo of eternity and power. Chapter 3, The Blood of Memory, the Circulation. The diseased tissue, the deadly illusion. If we descend 1 degree further into the dark and perfect geography of our own anatomy, leaving behind the structure of the bone and the bellows of the lungs, we find ourselves before the liquid miracle that sustains the scaffolding of life, the circulatory system. The heart, that tireless and blind muscle, beats 100,000 times a day. It pushes blood through thousands of kilometers of veins, arteries, and capillaries. Blood is the red river of existence. Its physiological mission is sublime and brutal. It must reach every corner of the organism, carrying the oxygen that gives life and collecting toxic waste to expel it. But blood possesses a terrifying vulnerability. Just as it is the perfect vehicle for nutrition, it is also the perfect vehicle for infection. If a toxin penetrates the bloodstream, blood becomes the distribution system of death. The infection travels driven by each beat, corrupting every organ, rotting the flesh from within, and carrying the fever to the very center of the brain. In the spiritual anatomy of the human being, and especially in those who have reached maturity, a lethal poison infiltrates the stream of consciousness. We shall call this relentless toxin, this virus that thickens the blood of the elderly and darkens the light in their eyes, the blood of memory. This is a clinical reality. We do not refer to functional memory that allows you to remember names or faces. We refer to emotional memory, nostalgic attachment, and the morbid cult of the past. We refer to the gangrene of nostalgia. Observe the majority of older people. If you pay attention, you will notice they have stopped living in the present. Their physical bodies sit in today's living room, but their minds wander through the cemeteries of decades ago. Their veins are clogged by clots of resentment. Their blood is thick, poisoned by the memory of betrayals, the pain of failed loves, and the painful longing for golden ages that will never return. The elder suffering from this toxemia lives in a state of constant hemorrhage. He sits at the family table and, instead of nourishing the moment with his wisdom, begins to bleed over his children's plates. He repeats the same old complaints. He reminds them of sacrifices made decades ago, demanding an emotional payment with interest. He curses the partner who cheated him in another century. He cries for parents who are already dust. He laments because any past time was better. This is the deadly illusion, believing that the past, simply by having occurred, has the right to continue governing the heartbeat of the present. It is an anatomical error. The individual infected by the blood of memory develops a destructive pathology. Spiritual metabolism stops, since the heart pumps the thick mud of nostalgia instead of the oxygenated blood of now. The body ages at a terrifying speed. The brow furrows permanently, and lips thin into a grimace of chronic bitterness. The nostalgic elder is a living museum of grievances. He becomes an archivist of sorrows, a guardian of tombs who dedicates his sacred time to polishing headstones instead of building empires. He wastes the fuel of his current life trying to reignite the cold ashes of his youth, failing to see the fire available to him today. Nature feels no mercy for nostalgia. The 3D universe, in its perfect machinery, only recognizes the present instant. Yesterday is a corpse. Biology teaches an unshakable law. If you tie a corpse to a living body, the rot of the dead will inevitably move to the living flesh until it devours it completely. If you wish to purge the disease of your old age, you must lie on the operating table and prepare for the most painful vascular intervention of your existence. You must stop the hemorrhage of memory. You must recognize that every nostalgic sigh is a drop of life falling into the void, feeding a ghost that has no right to eat. 'Tis the incision, the necessary cut. When a war surgeon finds a soldier with a severed artery losing life onto the mud, he has no time to comfort the patient. He does not listen to the story of the wound. The surgeon knows that if the blood continues to escape, the brain will enter ischemia and death will be certain. He executes a violent act. He applies a tourniquet. He wraps a strap firmly above the wound and tightens it with brutal force, crushing the flesh against the bone until the blood flow is completely cut. The tourniquet hurts horribly. It is acute agony. But that relentless restriction is the only thing separating the organism from the grave. It is survival. In the dissecting table of your character, you must become the war surgeon of your own mind. The intervention to save the majesty of your final years is named the tourniquet of yesterday. You must apply an asphyxiating, dictatorial, and unnegotiable pressure upon your own tongue and upon your own thoughts. The incision demands that you biologically prohibit the regurgitation of the past. How is this executed? When you feel the poison of memory rising through your throat, when you feel the additive urge to say, "Remember when you hurt me," or "In my day things were right," you will apply the tourniquet. Stop the flow. Bite your tongue. Close your eyes. Clench your fists until your knuckles turn white. The pain will be immense. Nostalgia and victimhood are physiological addictions. Your brain, used to receiving stress hormones every time you recalled a trauma, will protest like an addict. You will feel your identity is disappearing. That is exactly the sensation of necrosis being separated from healthy tissue. You must endure this pain without yielding a millimeter. You are not your past. You are not the business that failed 20 years ago or the divorce that shattered your youth. Those were accidents involving a vehicle you no longer drive. To keep bleeding today for a wound inflicted half a century ago is an act of anatomical stupidity. The tourniquet of yesterday requires a dialysis of the soul. You must connect your veins to the relentless machine of the present moment. You must pump the blood back clean, free of the sediment of old eras. This dialysis means forgiving. But understand forgiveness not as religious kindness. The monarch forgives as a mechanism of vascular hygiene. Forgiving is letting go of the tick sucking your blood. You do not excuse the betrayal. You simply deny the other permission to circulate through your veins as bitter bile. If someone tries to revive old quarrels or demands accounts for past errors, you will apply the external tourniquet. Look them in the eyes with the coldness of polished stone and say, "That man you speak of is dead. That world no longer exists. I only recognize the authority of today." This is your armor. By restricting the flow of nostalgia, you stop the hemorrhage of your vital energy. Initially, you will feel the cold vacuum of the amputated limb, but the physiological miracle will occur. By not pumping blood to the cemeteries, your heart will have colossal energy to irrigate the only territory that is yours, the now. 3. The eternal organ, the transmutation. When the tourniquet has done its work and the hemorrhage of nostalgia has been cauterized with discipline, the circulatory system experiences a resurrection incomprehensible to ordinary men. Your veins no longer carry the dark mud of lamentations. Your heart receives a total transfusion of plasma of the instant. The plasma of the instant is the blood of the immortals. It is a fluid completely lacking cellular memory. Its only function is to transport the majestic urgency of now. Irrigated by this eternal plasma, the transformation into the sovereign elder is visible. The face relaxes and recovers a vivid color. The eyes, which once looked at the ground, rise and acquire the sharp, cold glint of a predator guarding its territory. The back straightens because the individual no longer carries the corpse of their history. The mechanics of governing with the plasma of the instant is the maximum expression of power. Since your blood no longer contains the antigens of the past, you become biologically immune to emotional blackmail. When others try to manipulate you by reminding you of a past weakness, their attacks find no receptors. It will be like trying to poison a marble statue. The venom will slide away. You will look at them from the abyss of your renewal. They will try to invoke your ghosts and be terrified to find they have been annihilated. The monarch does not render accounts to yesterday. He does not defend battles lost 20 years ago. He imposes the law based exclusively on the weight of this millisecond. The freedom of this voluntary amnesia is terrifying. Imagine waking each morning with clean veins. Imagine realizing that spiritually you have just been born. You owe nothing. You carry no grudges. Your peace is not kidnapped in the past. It is a vital organ pumping inside your chest at a sovereign rhythm. The modern world worships youth because it believes vitality belongs to bodies unworn by time. But true vitality, the seismic force that shakes history, belongs to the monarch who has achieved the collapse of time in his veins. He has amputated anxious hope and cut the roots of bitter memory. By nourishing your body with the plasma of the instant, time stops being your enemy. The ticking clock is no longer the sound of your life exhausting, it is the metronome of your reign. Every beat of your heart becomes an irrevocable decree. You have purged the rot and become a spiritual anomaly. You are an elder whose blood is as clean and new as the first man who stepped on earth. Remove the needles from your arm. Lift your head. Feel the searing heat of this new blood traveling through your limbs, burning the fog of your lethargy. You have murdered the past on the operating table. From today, you have no history. You have uniquely and exclusively the absolute and lethal will of this exact and perfect instant. You are the source, the flow, and the destination. Your power is no longer a memory. It is a current of electricity that powers the entire universe from the center of your chest. Chapter 4. The Eye of the Witness, the Perception. The diseased tissue, the deadly illusion. If we continue our relentless descent through the anatomy of existence, we must stop before the most sophisticated, mysterious, and treacherous organ of human biology, the eye. The eyeball is a thermodynamic and optical marvel. It is a sphere of fluids and membranes designed to capture photons of light traveling through space. It focuses them through the lens and projects them onto the retina, where millions of nerve receptors translate that light energy into electrical impulses that the brain interprets as reality. The eye is our only window to the material universe. It is the exact frontier where the external world collides with the internal world. However, because our conception of reality depends entirely on the purity of this lens, the eye is also the organ most susceptible to the corruption of the ego. When the lens becomes dirty, the entire world appears to be stained. As the ordinary individual ages, the accumulation of failures and fears begins to alter perception. In clinical ophthalmology, when lens proteins degrade and clump together, the eye's natural lens becomes opaque, cloudy, and yellowish. This pathology is called a cataract. In the spiritual anatomy of the human being, we shall name this phenomenon of progressive blindness the cataract of the ego or emotional blindness. Observe the behavior of the aged biomass, that multitude of men and women who walk the world believing life owes them an apology. Their visual tissue is deeply diseased. They have developed a moral cataract so thick they have lost the ability to see things as they are. Every photon must pass through their personal wounds. What is the most devastating clinical symptom of this disease? The personalization of the universe. The elder suffering from emotional blindness believes, with an arrogance bordering on delirium, that everything happening around them is a direct attack. If a son makes a bad decision, the elder sees a lack of respect for him. He feels the son failed exclusively to humiliate him. If society changes, he sees a conspiracy to invalidate his legacy. If a friend pulls away to deal with their own tragedies, the sick elder only sees abandonment and betrayal. The diseased eye has lost depth of field. It cannot focus on the horizon. It only focuses on itself. This is the deadly illusion, the tragic conviction that we are the center of gravity for the actions of others. The biological wear this produces is colossal. The ordinary elder lives in chronic indignation. Their eyes are permanently bloodshot, tired of looking for culprits and exhausted from judging and condemning. By looking through the cataract of the ego, the individual submits to useless suffering. They cry for things that do not belong to them. They fight imaginary battles against windmills that had no intention of attacking. Nature, in its icy perfection, abhors the victim. The universe does not care if the rain offends you. The rain falls because the laws of thermodynamics dictate it, not to ruin your day. People lie and are selfish because their own biology pushes them to it, not because they designed a master plan to destroy your life. If you wish to reach the majesty of the immortals, you must prepare to climb onto the dissecting table. We must operate on that eye. We must tear off the scab of your visual selfishness. You must realize that your vision is currently a prison cell of mirrors where you only see your own distorted reflection in every event. To see the truth, you must first go through the terror of losing your favorite illusions of importance. The incision, the necessary cut. In the operating room of ophthalmology, cataract surgery is an act of millimeter-sized violence that requires superhuman precision. To return sight to the patient, the surgeon cannot cure the diseased lens with medicines. He must place a metal speculum to hold the eyelids open by force, preventing any blinking. Then, he takes a microscopic scalpel and makes an incision directly into the cornea. Through that tiny cut, he introduces a probe that emits ultrasound waves to pulverize the diseased lens. He destroys the cataract from within, vacuums it out, and leaves the capsule empty, ready to receive a brand new lens. The surgery is fast, but the concept of having the eye held open while a blade pierces it generates a primal terror. In the dissecting table of your character, the intervention you must execute is named the extirpation of personal offense. You will be the surgeon who holds your own eye open against your will. The incision consists of an act of rational cruelty. The next time the world disappoints you, you will physically refuse to close your eyes and retreat into the victim's cry. You will place the metal speculum of objectivity over your emotional eyelids. You will force yourself to look at the tragedy head-on. And in that precise instant of pain, when your ego begins to scream, "Why are they doing this to me?" you will introduce the scalpel of logic and pulverize that question. The extirpation of personal offense means drilling this cold truth into your brain. Nothing that others do is for you. They do it for themselves. This is the ultrasound probe that shatters the cataract. When your son is ungrateful, it is not to punish you. It is because he is mired in his own blindness and internal battle. He is the prisoner of his own defects. When someone lies, it is because they are a coward, not because you deserve to be deceived. To execute this cut, you must tear the pronoun me or I from all your interpretations. The sick man says, "They betrayed me." The operated surgeon says, "Someone committed a betrayal." The sick man says, "They disrespected me." The operated surgeon says, "That individual proved they have no manners." By removing the I from the equation, the wound stops hurting you. The poison does not enter your bloodstream because you are no longer the target. You are simply the witness of an inferior biological phenomenon occurring in front of you. This operation is painful because it destroys your sense of importance. Accepting that the universe ignores us with the same indifference with which we ignore ants creates an immense existential void. The newly operated patient will feel vertigo. The pure light of objective reality hurts when it first enters an eye that was used to the shadows of illusions and self-deception. But once the eye adapts to that raw, blinding light, blindness disappears forever. By ceasing to take the world's failures as a personal affront, energy wear drops to zero. You stop wasting tears on others' stupidity. Your eyelid stops trembling with indignation. The vacuum becomes your ultimate protection. In the clean cavity of your new perception, you must now maintain a sterile environment. Any attempt to reintroduce the me into what you see must be met with immediate surgical suppression. You are no longer the protagonist of the drama. You are the cold, clinical observer of a simulation in constant flux. The eternal organ, the transmutation. When the cataract has been vacuumed and personal offense has been rooted out, the nature of your vision undergoes a radical metamorphosis. You rise from a reactive mammal to a universal observer. We shall call this new implant the eye of the witness, or the gaze of the mountain. It is a cold, perfect lens. The eye of the witness does not judge, it simply registers. Think of the stone gargoyles on the cornices of Gothic cathedrals. Their eyes have been open for centuries. They have seen plagues, wars, and the death of kings. They have not shed a single tear, nor have they tried to change the course of history. They have the majestic and terrifying peace of pure observation. By installing the eye of the witness, you acquire that same geological quality. The elder who has reached sovereignty leaves the courtroom. He is no longer the prosecutor, nor the judge. He has resigned and retired to the upper gallery. When you look through this eternal organ, the chaos of your family or environment ceases to be a tragedy that drowns you. It becomes simple meteorological data. If an argument breaks out, the monarch is not disturbed. He watches with the same clinical coldness as a biologist watching beetles fight. He sees their accelerated pulses, hears their flawed arguments, understands the childish fears that drive them to scream. And he does absolutely nothing. That gaze, devoid of censure, panic, or approval, is the most suffocating and powerful weapon that exists in the human arsenal of the sovereign. The biomass is used to you reacting. They expect you to be indignant or participate in the drama. That is the fuel for their neurosis. But when they look toward the head of the table and meet the eye of the witness, opaque, unfathomable eyes that reflect no emotion, they experience a paralyzing terror. They feel they are being observed by the very abyss of the universe. Before that gaze, the manipulator runs out of arguments. The ungrateful son feels the weight of his own immaturity bouncing off a wall of silence. The offender discovers their attack failed to move you a single millimeter of mass. You cannot offend a mountain, and you cannot hurt the feelings of a stone witness. This anatomical freedom is the peak of maturity. Think of the energy you recover by refusing to suffer for the ignorance of others. Your only task is to witness the world without losing the rhythm of your own breathing. The compassion of the monarch is that of the lighthouse. He watches ships crash against reefs because of their own stupid decisions, and he does not turn off his light, nor does he get angry at the ocean. He understands the crash was inevitable. He feels a distant, clean sadness, but it never becomes anxiety. This new vision allows you to see the invisible threads of cause and effect. You see the end of the argument before it begins. You see the decay of the lie while it is being told. You are no longer part of the vibration. You are the space in which the vibration occurs. You are the silence that contains the noise. You have survived the worst of your own history. Do not tarnish your age by demanding the world behave according to your will. Abandon emotional blindness. Substitute your resentful eyes for the spheres of the witness. Sit in absolute silence, staring at the storm, and be the master of your own mind. You are the lord of the only empire that matters, a mind that has stopped judging and has therefore stopped bleeding. In this state, your eyes become mirrors for others, showing them their own smallness, while you remain untouchable, watching the play of shadows from the height of your eternal throne. Chapter 5. The muscle of the will, the tension. The diseased tissue, the deadly illusion. If we continue stripping the human being of their superficial wrappings on our cold dissecting table and cross the barrier of skin and protective fat, we find ourselves before the red and pulsating machinery that makes rebellion against gravity possible, the muscular tissue. Muscles are the biological engines of existence. They are bundles of contractile fibers designed by nature with a single and brutal purpose: to generate tension, support loads, and execute movement through the resistance of the material environment. Without the muscle, the most perfect skeleton would be an inert structure incapable of taking a single step forward. It is the engine. But the muscle possesses an implacable and terrifying physiological characteristic dictated by the laws of thermodynamic efficiency. It blindly obeys the law of use and disuse. The human body is a stingy administrator of its own energy. Maintaining muscular tissue alive and strong costs an immense amount of calories for the system. Therefore, if a muscle ceases to be subjected to tension, if it stops facing a resistance that justifies its existence, the brain gives a ruthless biological order. The body begins to cannibalize its own muscle. It devours it from within. It atrophies. It dissolves it to save energy, replacing power fibers with flabby adipose tissue. In clinical geriatrics, this progressive loss of mass, strength, and function is known as sarcopenia. In the spiritual anatomy of the aging individual, we shall call this same rot of the capacity for effort, the atrophy of the will. Observe with a clinical eye the overwhelming majority of men and women entering their final years. They have been infected by the most seductive and destructive virus of modern society, the lie of absolute rest. It has been whispered in their ears that, since they have already worked for decades, they have earned the divine right to softness. They are convinced that the supreme goal of old age is total comfort. The elder sick with spiritual atrophy desperately seeks the most padded chair in the house. He delegates tasks he could still do for himself. He flees from complex conversations because he is no longer at the age for upsets. He abandons the reading of deep texts because they tire his eyes. He avoids walking if he can be carried. This is the deadly illusion, believing that comfort prolongs life, when biology demonstrates mathematically that the absence of tension is the exact prelude to death. The result of this softness is a humiliating degradation. By ceasing to exercise the muscle of his will, the individual becomes soft, not only in flesh, but in spirit. He becomes dependent. And dependence is the silent killer of respect. When you stop carrying your own weight, you force your lineage to carry it for you. Your children and relatives begin to treat you as a fragile burden. They assist you with a mix of pity and obligation, but in their animal biology, respect evaporates. No one respects an organism that has renounced its own traction. The chronic pain of the ordinary elder is rarely caused by the wear of having done too much. It is caused by the atrophy of doing nothing. By losing the muscular corset of the will, the entire structure collapses under the weight of gravity. If you aspire to the majesty of the monarchs, you must repudiate the doctrine of rest. You must look at the padded chair with the same disgust with which you would look at an open coffin. Life is resistance, and the human spirit only stays alive while it opposes something. We are going to extirpate the softness from your system. 'Tis the incision, the necessary cut. In the world of elite physical training and sports physiology, there is a raw and painful truth. Muscle does not grow or strengthen by caressing it. For a muscle to recover its density and strength, it must be subjected to a process of controlled destruction. The athlete must lift a load heavier than what they are used to. Under this extreme tension, the muscle fibers literally break. Micro-tears occur in the tissue. The muscle bleeds at a microscopic level, becomes inflamed, and burns. It is only through this damage, through this violent incision provoked by weight, that the body receives the alarm signal and sends nutrients to rebuild. The body rebuilds the fibers, making them this time thicker, denser, and stronger, so they do not break again under the same effort. This process is called hypertrophy. In the dissecting table of your own character, the surgical intervention you must execute to cure the atrophy of your will is named the voluntary tear. You must become your own therapeutic executioner. You must take the scalpel of discomfort and tear the wrapping of your complacency. The incision consists of the premeditated, daily, and systematic search for friction, effort, and heavy loads. For the man and woman in maturity, this requires an iron discipline. Physically, execution means refusing to yield to decay. If you can walk, you will walk with a firm step, feeling the effort in your lungs, refusing to shuffle. If you can lift a heavy object, you will lift it yourself, repudiating the unsolicited help of children who try to invalidate you out of love. You will embrace the morning cold, instead of immediately turning on the heating, using temperature to wake the sleeping metabolism of your primitive body. You will subject your flesh to tension, because flesh that does not tense is flesh that rots. But the deepest incision must be made in the muscle of the psyche, the voluntary emotional and intellectual tear. When a serious problem arises in your family or wealth, the diseased tissue will ask you to look away, to delegate, to take a mental analgesic, and sit and watch television. Cut that impulse at the root. The incision demands that you walk toward the conflict. Assume the burden. Sit at your desk, open the painful documents, confront the betrayals or the red numbers, and force your brain to consume energy to find the solution. You will feel the sting of mental fatigue. You will feel your head throb. That is the muscle of your will tearing. It is the hypertrophy of character. Extirpating comfort means annihilating from your vocabulary the most cowardly and toxic phrase an elder can utter. At my age, I'm no longer up for these things. The surgeon of himself knows that his age is precisely when he most needs to subject himself to the load because he lacks biological youth. The youth can afford to be lazy because his hormones keep him upright. You cannot. If you drop the weight of your own discipline, you will fall into the abyss of irrelevance in months. Expose yourself to the pain of rigor. If you are studying something new and don't understand, do not abandon the book. Force your neurons to create new synapses through the fire of frustration. If you must have a severe conversation to bring order to your house, do not postpone it. Feel the tension in your stomach. Hold the accelerated pulse. Look them in the eye and assume the caloric cost of imposing your authority. The surgery of the voluntary tear is exhausting. At first, each day will feel like you have received a beating. Your relatives will tell you that you are crazy, that you must rest. You must ignore them with the absolute contempt a lion feels for the advice of sheep. They do not understand the forge. 3. The eternal organ, the transmutation. When the scalpel of discipline has finished its work, when the body and spirit have been subjected to mechanical tension long enough and lethargy has been expelled through the sweat of effort, the elder's box of flesh transmutes. The atrophied fibers are replaced by bundles of spiritual muscle. They are immensely dense, hard, and resistant. You have developed the musculature of titans. To this new anatomical state, the definitive implant that crowns your will, we shall call the muscle of biometric tension, or the hypertrophy of the soul. This is your final form. In biomechanics, there is a type of force immensely superior to the act of lifting or pushing. It is isometric tension. It is the capacity of a muscle to generate a colossal amount of force and support tons of pressure while remaining in absolute immobility. Think of the thick cables of a suspension bridge. To the naked eye, the cables do not move. They seem static. But inside, the steel molecules are under terrifying tension, fighting a death match against gravity to prevent the bridge from falling. The monarch who has developed soul hypertrophy operates under this principle of isometric tension. He no longer needs to prove his strength by running around or raising his voice. His strength has become internal and silent. You become the master pillar holding the entire structure of your lineage. With this eternal muscle, the dynamics of your existence change chillingly for the biomass around you. Since you have embraced the pain of effort voluntarily on your dissecting table, the problems the ordinary world considers unbearable are ridiculously light to you. When family tragedy hits or an economic crisis threatens your home, the soft men and women around you will crumble. Their atrophied muscles cannot bear reality. They will panic and collapse. But you will not. You will anchor your feet, activate the muscle of the will, and receive the weight of the crisis on your shoulders. Like the steel cable, you will not flinch. Your face will show no panic. Your breathing will stay slow. Under the pressure of 1,000 atmospheres, you will hold the weight of the world without emitting a single note of lament. The authority emanating from this act of moral hypertrophy is absolute. Your descendants will see you holding the vault of heaven while everything around collapses. They will understand instinctively that you are a superior organism. They will no longer treat you with pity. They will render the tribute of obedience that physics reserves for geological forces. The biomass orbits the larger mass. You have become the largest mass in your solar system. The eternal muscle of the will has a divine property. Unlike the flesh muscle, the spirit muscle has no biological limit. The more your physical body ages, the more room your soul has to expand. The true beauty of the monarch is the asymmetry between external fragility and internal monstrosity. You may need a cane to support a worn knee, but when you look into the eyes of an arrogant young man, the isometric pressure of your gaze will force him to look away and bow his head. This is the final reward of the dissecting table. Death and decay prey on the soft, devouring them while they still breathe. Rise from the surgical table. Feel the weight of this new density. Expel the poison of deserved rest. Go out to seek friction and lift the weight of your own existence. While a single beat remains in your chest, refuse to surrender to the soft comfort of oblivion. You are the tension. Act like it. Act. Chapter 6. The Skin of Indifference, the Frontier. The diseased tissue, the deadly illusion. If we unfold the intricate map of human anatomy and turn our gaze away from the bony depths and vital organs, we will find ourselves face to face with the most extensive, exposed, and vulnerable structure of our biology, the integumentary system, the skin. At first glance, it seems a simple wrapping, but in medical science, it is a frontier. The skin is a thermodynamic and military frontier of colossal proportions. It is the border wall that separates the sterile sanctuary of our internal organs from the chaos plagued by bacteria, radiation, and mechanical aggressions that constitute the external world. The skin is designed to be a barrier. It has millions of nerve endings. These nerves warn us of danger, the heat of fire, the edge of a knife, but its primary function is not to feel, but to isolate. When the skin fulfills its purpose, the organism survives in the purity of its own isolation. However, what happens in clinical dermatology when this barrier fails? There are terrifying pathologies like hyperesthesia. In such cases, or the loss of the epidermis through severe burns, the skin becomes so thin, so torn, and so hypersensitive that the slightest touch of the wind causes an indescribable agony. The patient loses their frontier. The outside world penetrates without resistance, causing systemic infections and a pain that maddens the mind. In the spiritual architecture of mature humanity, this clinical tragedy manifests daily with devastating cruelty. We shall call this necrotic tissue, this pathological vulnerability that condemns old age to continuous suffering, the skin too thin, or the infection of vulgar empathy. It is a structural failure of the sovereign. Observe closely the legions of men and women who, having surpassed half a century of life, live in a state of perpetual emotional tearing. They have completely lost their inner frontier. Their spiritual skin is as thin as tissue paper. They absorb absolutely all the chaos, anxiety, and drama of the ecosystem that surrounds them. If an adult son suffers a job setback due to his own incompetence, the thin-skinned elder does not sleep, suffers palpitations, and assumes the stress as if the dismissal had been their own. If a neighbor tells a tragic piece of gossip, the elder becomes distressed. If the news announces a crisis, the elder is filled with terror. They feel it is their moral duty to suffer for the pains of their lineage and for the tragedies of the universe. This is the deadly illusion. Romantic and cowardly society has brainwashed us into believing that suffering for others is the ultimate expression of love. They told us that extreme empathy is a sacred virtue. They say the good elder is the one who worries and is distressed by every stumble of their descendants. Biology and physics repudiate this lie with disgust. Suffering for someone else's pain when you lack the power to solve it is not love. It is a parasitic infection. It is allowing stress and stupidity to cross your border. The individual suffering from this emotional hyperesthesia lives in a hell of chronic exhaustion. Since their skin absorbs everything, they become the emotional trash can of their family. The younger ones, who are instinctive energy predators, detect this lack of frontier. They throw their dramas and debts at the elder. The elder absorbs them, and the young leave relieved, having transferred their weight to the fragile shoulders of the one who should be resting. Living without a defined frontier is an act of cellular suicide. You cannot rule your empire if your castle walls are demolished. You wither and destroy your own immune system. To reach the unshakable sovereignty of the monarch, we must climb back onto the operating table. We must tear off this diseased skin, this pathetic sensitivity that keeps you chained to the pain of fools. Prepare for the incision, because in this operating room, we are going to burn the nerve endings that make you suffer. It is the incision, the necessary cut. In the field of trauma surgery, when a patient presents an open wound where nerves are left raw and exposed to the air, the surgeon must execute one of the most primitive and violent procedures, cauterization. He must take a red-hot metal instrument or an electrosurgical unit and burn the living flesh. Fire destroys the nerves. The fire destroys the exposed nerve endings, melts the bleeding capillaries, and seals the wound with a scab of dead tissue. The pain of the burn is excruciating, but the result is immediate salvation. By destroying the nerve, the patient stops feeling the agony of exposure. The hemorrhage stops. It is the end of the leak. On the dissecting table of your own character, the intervention you must execute to eradicate thin skin is called the cauterization of guilt. You will be the surgeon, and your will shall be the hot iron. The incision consists of the deliberate, calculated, and cruel act of crossing your arms and watching consequences. You must watch how a loved one suffers the consequences of their own actions, absolutely refusing to intervene, rescue them, or suffer for them. Society has programmed your nerve endings to feel guilt if you do not intervene. They injected the poison of believing you are responsible for the happiness of your lineage. Therefore, when you see your son squander his money or a relative entangle themselves in a destructive relationship, your diseased biological instinct will demand that you run to save them. It will demand you lend money or cry with them. It is in that exact millisecond where you must apply the hot iron. Apply it over your own pity. You will force yourself to take a step back. You will observe the fall of your relative with the coldness of a scientist observing gravity in a lab. You will feel the sting of the protective instinct burning. You will feel the guilt clawing at your chest, demanding that you act. Do not act. Do not move a single finger. Do not offer your wallet. Do not offer your roof. Let the blow of reality crush the one who made the bad decision. The pain you will feel by not helping is the cauterization of guilt. You are burning the nerve that tied you to someone else's irresponsibility. The extirpation of this toxic empathy requires an icy understanding of human nature. Suffering is the only chisel that carves character. If you constantly cushion the falls of your children or your environment, you are stealing the pain they need to mature. You are turning them into useless parasites. The greatest act of love a wise elder can commit toward a weak generation is to allow them to bleed their own errors until they learn to walk with dignity. The cauterization of guilt must be applied to your entire life. If a friend calls to vomit chronic complaints, apply the fire. I will not participate. If the news tries to inject panic, apply the fire. Turn off the screen and return to your reading. At first, this surgery will make you feel like a monster. Your relatives will be scandalized. They will call you insensitive. They will accuse you of having become a cold person lacking a heart. You must receive these accusations as clinical proof that the operation was a success. Their indignation is the smoke rising from the cauterized flesh. They are angry because they discovered the emotional trash can has closed its doors forever. You have stopped being a hostage to the misfortunes of others. In the painless silence of that sealed wound, spiritual biology will begin to weave the definitive organ of your liberation. You have reclaimed your vital energy to feed your own life, not the parasitic dramas of those who refuse to grow. The frontier is being rebuilt with a density the world cannot pierce. 3. The eternal organ, the transmutation. When the hypersensitive tissue has been incinerated and the cauterization of guilt has sealed your soul's frontiers, the monarch's anatomy undergoes a defensive mutation of epic proportions. The scab from the burns does not fall off. It thickens, hardens, and transforms into a new integumentary system. You abandon the fragile skin of scared mammals and develop the evolutionary armor of the great ancient predators. To this new organ, massive and impenetrable, we shall call the scaled carapace or the skin of indifference. Observe the biology of great reptiles, of crocodiles, or of rhinoceroses. They do not have the thin skin of a sheep. They are covered by plates of dense keratin, armored scales, and layers of leather so thick that jungle thorns and the claws of lesser predators simply slide off without leaving a single mark. These animals walk through the world with a heavy, slow majesty. They are absolutely immutable before the smallnesses of the ecosystem because they know their outer frontier is an invincible containment wall. The monarch's scaled carapace works under this same principle of materials physics. It is a semi-permeable membrane of the highest spiritual technology. What is the mechanical marvel of this armor? That it works in only one direction. The skin of indifference allows your love, your wisdom, and your intention to flow freely from your interior toward the world. You still love your family, you still provide your example, but the armor blocks all penetration. It blocks any attempt at penetration from the outside. When you wrap yourself in this skin, the dynamics of aggression and drama become physically sterile. Imagine someone in your inner circle tries to provoke you. They launch a veiled insult or a reproach for your new coldness. It fails to enter. Before, when you had thin skin, that insult would have pierced your epidermis and caused days of insomnia. But now, the insult flies through the air and hits the scales of your indifference. Clink. The insult bounces. It falls to the ground, turned to dust. You do not even feel the impact. Your nerve endings have been withdrawn to a place so deep within your castle that external aggression is as irrelevant as a mosquito buzzing against the thick window of a plane in flight. By being protected by this eternal organ, you reach the absolute supremacy of tactical indifference. Indifference, misunderstood by the biomass, is seen as apathy. But for the monarch, it is a calculation of density and energy economy. It is the mathematical understanding that 99% of the things for which humanity cries and fights lack any importance at a geological level. Someone speaks ill of you. You are indifferent. A son ruins his marriage. You are indifferent. Society enters collective hysteria over a new manufactured panic. You are indifferent. You observe all this from the balcony of your armor. You see the storm, but you do not get wet. You stay sovereign. This tactical insensitivity is the greatest gift old age can grant you. Since you no longer invest energy in defending against minor scratches, you have an ocean of vitality for your own enjoyment. Your mind becomes clear and sharp as a diamond. You can enjoy a coffee or a text with absolute fullness. The world will fear and respect you in equal measure. People will avoid bringing you gossip and minor problems because they will know their panic crashes against a wall of icy indifference. They will understand you are not a trash can. They will understand that to approach your throne, they must be clean. Do not feel pity for your old skin. Leave it behind like the snake that sheds its narrow and withered wrapping on the desert stones. Abandon the tyranny of destructive empathy. You are the end of the evolutionary chain of your lineage. Lift your forehead and assume the weight of your scales. Walk through the minefield of society with the cold and invulnerable smile of one who has discovered the secret of eternal peace. It does not consist in preventing the world from firing its arrows, but in having armor so majestically thick that you do not even notice when the arrows bounce off your chest. Chapter 7. The Stomach of Acceptance, the Digestion. The diseased tissue, the deadly illusion. If we descend through the dark, humid cavern of the esophagus, leaving behind the frontier of the skin and the bellows of the lungs, we arrive at the burning cauldron where the organism's survival is decided, the digestive system, governed by the relentless machinery of the stomach. In human anatomy, the stomach is not a delicate organ. It is a furnace of chemical and mechanical destruction. It is a muscular sac designed to grind matter, bathe food in pure hydrochloric acid, and decompose complex cellular structures into a basic liquid the body can absorb. The stomach has no moral preferences, no opinion on taste, and no judgment on origin. Its mission is to process. But when the stomach sickens, when its lining fails or the food it receives is violently rejected, one of the most exhausting reflexes of biology occurs. Vomiting. Vomiting is the absolute rejection of matter. It is the spasmodic contraction of a body that refuses to digest what has crossed its lips, expelling it back outward. In the spiritual anatomy of the human being, Especially in the mature stage where losses accumulate, an identical pathology devours peace from within. We shall call this ulcer of the soul, this pathetic inability to process the reality surrounding us, the chronic vomiting of reality or spiritual indigestion. It is a terminal weakness. Observe the majority of elderly men and women. They have lost the capacity to digest life. They live in a state of perpetual indigestion. Their spiritual stomachs are closed, inflamed, and ulcerated. They have developed a gag reflex toward any event that does not fit their infantile expectations of how the universe should be. The elder sick with indigestion rejects the modern world with disgust. He vomits incessant complaints about new customs, technology, or the music in the streets. He rejects the natural decay of his own body. Every new joint pain is received with indignation, as if biology had committed a personal injustice against him. He rejects loneliness, the ingratitude of children, and the loss of status. By refusing to digest the raw reality served on his plate, the ordinary individual spends his time vomiting bitterness from dawn until dusk. This is the deadly illusion, believing that by complaining and spitting it out, reality will change its flavor. The biological wear of this chronic indigestion is catastrophic. The act of complaining and mentally resisting a finished fact requires a gigantic amount of energy. The elder who does not accept his present lives with a perpetual heartburn in his soul. The acid of his resistance corrodes the walls of his own being. The ulcer grows. The individual becomes embittered and irascible, unable to enjoy the few pleasures remaining because his mouth always tastes like the bile of resentment. Nature abhors this weakness. The universe is a vast banquet where exquisite triumphs are served, but also cups overflowing with poison and death. You cannot sit at the table of existence and demand the menu adapt to your palate. Time will not stop because you fear aging. Society will not stop changing because it inconveniences you. Death will not stop stalking loved ones because you kick and scream. To reach majesty, we must operate on that inflamed stomach. 'Tis the incision, the necessary cut. In the operating room of gastroenterology, when an ulcer has perforated the stomach wall and caused massive internal bleeding, the surgeon cannot cure the patient with soft diets. He must execute a gastrectomy. He must take his scalpel, open the abdomen, locate the necrotic tissue, and cut it out from the root. He must suture. In the dissecting table of your own character, the intervention to cure the indigestion of your soul is named the suppression of the gag reflex or the swallowing of gall. You will be the surgeon of your own pain. The incision consists of an act of extreme psychological violence against your own habits of complaint. The next time life serves you a bitter dish or news that shatters your plans, you will physically refuse to spit it out. You will force yourself to chew the tragedy, swallow it whole, and keep it in the bottom of your stomach without allowing a single drop of complaint to escape your throat. This is the cure. Executing this cut demands blood-chilling self-mastery. Imagine the worst scenario: an adverse medical diagnosis, a son who squanders your inheritance, or an investment that crumbles. The animal instinct of the biomass will demand you scream, curse the heavens, and vomit your despair over everyone around you. In that millisecond, you will apply the scalpel. You will lock your jaws. You will bite the pain. You will feel the taste of ash and acid rising, seeking the exit as a lament. You will swallow hard. You will force the muscles of your esophagus to push that reality, hard and cutting like ground glass, into your belly. In the absolute darkness of your silence, you will emit the only surgical sentence that heals. This is what it is. It has occurred. I do not like it. I did not ask for it, but I receive it. I swallow it, and I accept it as an unmovable geological fact of my existence. This is the suppression of the reflex. It requires the total extirpation of the word injustice from your vocabulary. Injustice is a concept invented by weak men to avoid accepting thermodynamics. A lion does not consider it unjust that a gazelle runs faster. He adjusts his strategy. When you stop labeling misfortunes as injustices, the ulcer stops. Trallow the world as it is, not as storybooks told you. Swallow loneliness without sugar. Swallow the misunderstanding of the youth without seeking explanations. Swallow the decline of your physical body without turning away from the mirror. This incision is a gastric agony that will feel like your insides are burning. But if you resist, if you keep your mouth closed and your face impassive like marble, the magic of spiritual physiology will occur. Your stomach acids will do their work. The pain, not being expelled, will be forced to dissolve. You are preparing the anatomical ground for the installation of the supreme organ. 3. The eternal organ, the transmutation. When the ulcer of rejection has been rooted out and the gag reflex of complaint amputated, the gastric cavity of human existence undergoes a terrifying evolutionary metamorphosis. The weak stomach of the ordinary man is replaced by a cauldron of incandescent steel. This is the metabolism of stone. Observe the destructive marvel of the crocodile. It is a prehistoric monster of infinite patience. When it hunts, it swallows prey almost whole. Its stomach is a tank of acid so concentrated it dissolves thick bones, horns, hooves, and even metal. Nothing is too hard for the crocodile's stomach to reduce. The monarch who has assimilated absolute acceptance develops this same organ. By possessing this eternal stomach, the relationship with tragedy is inverted. Pain, betrayal, or financial disaster cease to be mortal poisons and become, purely and simply, high-density caloric fuel for your empire. When misfortune throws a block of granite at your head, the biomass breaks, but the monarch takes that stone, opens his jaws and swallows it. He introduces it to his inner furnace. The acid of his relentless acceptance pours over the tragedy. He does not cry. He uses the power of silence to dissolve it. He extracts pure nutrients of wisdom and tactical calculation. He transforms the venom of enemies into vitamins that strengthen his reign. This capacity to digest everything grants an overwhelming peace. It is the state of repose for one who no longer fears any ingredient the universe puts on their plate. Imagine sitting at a family dinner, knowing no one can give you news that causes indigestion. If they announce success, you swallow and smile coldly. If they announce ruin or betrayal, you do not choke or scream. You mastis with iron jaws, swallow, and from imperturbable tranquility, pronounce your next move. People around you will feel a sacred terror seeing you process misfortune this way. Modern society is designed to pity those who vomit pain. They will not know how to manipulate an organism capable of swallowing the worst tragedies without altering its breath. They will see an ancient Leviathan, not a victim. Acceptance is not slave resignation. Resignation is crossing your arms while the poison kills you. Acceptance is a digestive sovereignty. It is swallowing the venom, activating the nuclear furnace of the will, and converting tragedy into unnegotiable kinetic energy. You are the predator of your own circumstances. The universe is a heartless restaurant that never asks your preference. Stop calling the waiter to complain. Stop asking for a different dish. Burn the complaint book. You have reached the final stage not for soft purees, but to chew iron and swallow pain. Digest the world before it tries to devour you. Chapter 8. The Nervous System of Detachment, the Pain. The diseased tissue, the deadly illusion. If we delve into the intricate and terrifying geography of our own anatomy, beyond the skin that isolates us, beyond the blood that nourishes us and the muscle that mobilizes us, we reach the master control network that dictates every millisecond of our material experience. The nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord form the grid. The primary function of this system is not to generate force, but to transmit information. The most urgent, primitive and powerful information that the nervous system is designed to transport at the speed of lightning is, without a doubt, pain. Physical pain is an exquisite survival mechanism. It is the guardian of anatomical integrity. But when we leave the plane of cellular biology and enter the dimension of the spirit, we discover that the human being has corrupted this perfect mechanism. He has created a ghost neural network, a parallel nervous system designed exclusively to electrocute himself voluntarily and constantly. We call this pathology attachment. We shall call this degenerative pathology, which inflames the neural connections of the mind and condemns mature humanity to a chronic and useless torture, the inflammation of attachment or the nervous system of possession. Observe with the aseptic coldness of our operating room the behavior of the aging biomass. These are infantile. Men and women who, despite having lived decades, remain convinced of one of the most arrogant and destructive fallacies of the species, the belief that they can own something or someone. The ordinary individual walks through the world conjuring the possessive pronoun like a magic spell. He says, "my house, my money, my children." He has extended the cables of his emotional nervous system outside his own body and plugged them directly into inanimate objects, bank accounts, and what is even more tragic, into the bodies and wills of other human beings. This is the deadly illusion, believing that the universe has granted you ownership over matter or souls. What is the clinical symptom of this inflammation? The perpetual agony of loss. When you connect your nerve endings to external things, you are at the mercy of the thermodynamic chaos of the world. If you believe you own your wealth, every fluctuation of the economy feels like a direct stab in your chest. It is a constant shock. If you believe you own your children, every independent decision they make generates an electric shock of betrayal and abandonment in your brain. The possessive elder suffers phantom limb syndrome at a spiritual level. A part of his life that has already been amputated by time hurts him, but he refuses to let it go. Chronic inflammation of attachment devours the peace of old age. The individual who clings to the external lives in a state of uninterrupted alert and panic. He does not sleep. He becomes jealous, controlling, and suffocating. He attempts to retain family through the blackmail of guilt, demanding calls and attention. He feels that if they move away, they are tearing off a piece of his own flesh. The pain he feels is not the noble pain of natural wear. It is the friction of dragging chains that he himself has tied to his neck. Nature does not recognize private property. The universe is a constant flow of atoms that group and disperse. Nothing you have belongs to you. Everything is rented. Your house, your fortune, your loved ones, and even the flesh of your own body are temporary loans that entropy will reclaim with relentless mathematical exactness. To refuse to accept this physical law is the equivalent of dipping your hands in boiling acid. If you desire to reach the icy and absolute freedom of the first cause, if you long for the autumn of your existence to be a parade of majesty instead of a pathetic plea not to lose what will inevitably go, you must return to the table. We must open the spine of your psyche. We must execute a high-precision surgery. The incision, the necessary cut. In modern neurosurgery, there is an extreme procedure reserved for those suffering from devastating chronic pain that no morphine can relieve. When a damaged nerve sends uninterrupted signals of agony that threaten to destroy the individual's sanity, the surgeon executes a neurectomy. He cuts the nerve. By physically interrupting the transmission cable, the affected area loses sensitivity, but the patient recovers his life. In the dissecting table of your own character, the surgical intervention you must execute to cure the inflammation of attachment is named the anesthesia of renunciation or the neurectomy of mind. You will be the surgeon operating on your own emotional marrow. The incision consists of an exercise in premeditated cruelty against your own instincts of possession. You must voluntarily let go of that which you love most before the universe comes to tear it from you by force. This is an anticipatory strike. The ordinary individual avoids thinking about death, ruin, or abandonment. He closes his eyes and prays that misfortune never knocks. The monarch instead walks directly toward the mental dissection room and murders possessive hope. How is the scalpel applied in the tissue of your daily life? Sit in the center of your house, surrounded by the objects you have accumulated. Look at your estate, and in the inclement silence of your solitude, pronounce the cut. None of this is mine. It is wood, it is metal, it is paper. Tomorrow fire may reduce it to ashes, and my soul will remain intact. I renounce. You will feel the edge of the scalpel cutting the nerve of materialism. Then raise the difficulty of the surgery. Think of the people you love most in this world, your children, your spouse, or your closest allies. The animal instinct will scream at you that they belong to you, that they are your life. It is here that you must perform the deepest and most painful cut of your entire existence. Look them in the eyes at the next family gathering and execute the emotional neurectomy. Tell yourself with mathematical coldness, you are not mine. You are independent travelers that the universe put in my path. Sooner or later, Death or distance will separate us. If you die before me, I will mourn your physical absence, but I will not be destroyed, because you never belonged to me. If you abandon me, I will open the door without shedding a tear, because I cannot lose what was never my property. This is true logic. This incision is a true psychological butchery. Your ego will bleed profusely. You will feel the terrifying vertigo of being left with completely empty hands. Society will tell you that to think this way is to be soulless and pessimistic. The biomass confuses suffocating attachment with pure love. You must ignore the cheap morality of the slaves of attachment. What you are doing on the operating table is not killing love. You are murdering fear. The anticipated pain you inflict acts as a thermodynamic vaccine. By subjecting your nervous system to the worst losses, you cauterize the wound before it occurs. You rob tragedy of its surprise factor. You cut the transmission cable. And by cutting the nerve of the pronoun mine, the possibility of suffering for loss is reduced to zero, preparing the spinal cavity for the installation of the definitive neural network that will govern your body until the last beat. The eternal organ, the transmutation. When the scalpel of detachment has severed the ties of possession, the patient's nervous system is not left numb or dead. An electrical transmutation occurs. The old biological nerves, inflamed by fear, are replaced by pristine conduits. We call this the silver network or the sovereign nervous system. In the physics of metals, pure silver element possesses the highest electrical and thermal conductivity. Energy travels through silver with almost zero resistance, without generating destructive friction. The silver network means you have acquired the divine capacity to interact with the material world. You can feel love, beauty, and wealth with dazzling intensity, but without any of those energies generating the friction of attachment within you, you become the perfect conductor of existence. Operating with the silver network, the dynamics of your affective relationships suffer a total inversion. The ordinary man, because he is afraid of losing what he has, loves with greed. He loves with a closed fist. He tries to imprison the water between his fingers and despairs as it escapes. The monarch, instead, loves with open and flat hands. He understands that freedom is the only atmosphere where love can breathe. Since you have accepted that you do not possess your children or your goods, you become a majestic host instead of a distressed jailer. When your family gathers, you enjoy their presence with a clarity that attached men will never know, precisely because you know the encounter is ephemeral and sacred. You do not demand future loyalty. You do not charge an emotional toll for your company. You pour your wisdom and resources upon them with the generosity of an emperor, knowing that, if tomorrow they decide never to return, the center of gravity of your universe will not move a single millimeter. This absolute absence of possessiveness grants you an invulnerable tactical power against manipulators. Emotional blackmail works only by grabbing the nerves of attachment. The offender threatens to withdraw love, expecting the pain of loss to force you to yield. But they will meet the terrifying cold of silver. The blackmailer will say, "If you do this, I will not see you again." The monarch, with the silver network operating in perfect silence, will respond with a tranquility that will freeze the blood of the room. The gates of my empire are open to enter and to leave. I wish you a good journey. Close it on your way out. By not finding the nerve of attachment, the aggressor's threat falls into the void. The manipulator discovers that you are an unexpugnable organism, that you have no panic buttons, and that you are perfectly willing to witness the collapse of your social environment before sacrificing your peace. Here lies the great geometric paradox. People instinctively flee from those who try to retain them, but gravitate irresistibly toward those who do not need them. By demonstrating that you do not need anyone to breathe, you become a magnet of unnegotiable respect. Your family will seek the shadow of your immutability. Old age is the natural process of stripping that biology imposes on us. The skin wrinkles, muscles give way, and the people of our generation begin to disappear. The elder who fights this stripping dies in life, electrocuted by the pain of trying to retain what entropy tears away, but the monarch precedes entropy. He strips himself voluntarily. He executes renunciation before nature demands it. You are not a slave chained to gold, nor a prisoner of your own fatherly feelings. You are the temporary administrator of a segment of reality. When illness or death appear in your salon, you will not emit a shrill cry. You will stand, look loss in the eye, and with the majesty of one who has a nervous system clean of possessive inflammation, you will hand over the keys of the kingdom smiling. You know with mathematical certainty that you never had anything to lose. You are the empty vessel that contains the infinite. Discover the freedom of walking the world knowing that your peace of mind does not depend on the sun rising tomorrow, nor on your blood honoring you, nor on your wealth enduring. It rests solely on the indestructible, infinite and lethal perfection of your own empty hands. The surgery is complete. The wires are cut. Chapter 9. The Rhythmic Heart, the Pulse. The diseased tissue, the deadly illusion. If we penetrate the exact center of the thoracic cavity, shielded behind the bone cage of the ribs and enveloped by the network of the lungs, we find ourselves before the primary motor of biological existence, the heart. In the science of cardiology, the heart is not the romantic seat of feelings, but a relentless muscular pump. It is a marvel of hydraulic and electrical engineering. Its function is to contract and relax, systole and diastole, in a continuous cycle that cannot stop for even a single minute from the womb to the grave. But the true wonder of the heart resides not in its muscular strength, but in its electrical control system. In the right atrium lies the sinoatrial node, the body's natural pacemaker. This tiny cluster of specialized cells dictates the heart rate. It sends an electrical spark that travels through the walls of the myocardium, ordering the flesh to contract with a perfect rhythm. When this system works in harmony, the organism knows peace. However, when the brain is flooded with the hormones of panic, stress, or fear, the sympathetic nervous system hijacks the sinoatrial node. It forces it to fire electrical discharges at a frantic speed. The heart enters tachycardia. It whispers urgency. If panic is absolute, the muscle stops pumping blood rhythmically. It begins to tremble, vibrating chaotically without managing to move the blood. In medicine, this lethal state is called fibrillation. In the spiritual anatomy of humanity, especially in those who have begun to see the end of their timeline, there is a devastating electrical pathology that destroys the majesty of mature age. To this short circuit of the soul, to this incessant trembling that devours the elder's dignity, we shall call the tachycardia of despair or the arrhythmia of panic. Observe with a clinical eye the behavior of the vast majority of older people. They live in a state of chronic spiritual tachycardia and constant rushing. Upon perceiving that biological years are shortening, their reptilian brain panics. They feel time slipping through their hands like fine sand, and in an absurd and pathetic attempt to regain control, they accelerate their internal rhythm. They want to solve all their family's problems today. They want adult children to mature now. The elder sick with arrhythmia does not walk. He precipitates. He does not speak. He runs over his words. He does not wait. He demands. His chest throbs with the haste of one who feels death at his heels. This is the deadly illusion, the irrational belief that speed is an antidote against the passage of time. The biomass believes that if it accelerates its reactions, if it intervenes quickly in every crisis, and if it becomes distressed at high speed by the news, it is proving that it is still alive and still useful. The thermodynamic and biological wear of this existential tachycardia is the primary cause of senile deterioration. A heart beating at 150 beats per minute while at rest is burning its own machinery. The individual who reacts with panic to the daily problems of their lineage lives bathed in cortisol. Their blood pressure breaks their own capillaries. Their mind clouds because fear demands too much caloric energy. The accelerated elder becomes a generator of chaos for their own home. Instead of being the anchor of the family, they become the motor of the storm. Their children and grandchildren feel the nervous vibration, the tremor of spiritual fibrillation. Instead of seeking their advice, they flee from their presence. Nature instinctively rejects unstable organisms. No one can rest beside an engine that is about to melt from overheating. The gravity of the universe is in no hurry. Planets complete their orbits in silences that last millennia. Mountains take eras to rise, and eons to turn to dust. Haste is the seal of the slave. Haste is the unmistakable mark of the prey fleeing the predator. The king never runs. if you wish to reach the absolute crown of the first cause, if you long for your old age to be a monument to immutability and not a spectacle of pathetic nervousness, you must return to the dissecting table. We must open your chest. We must apply an electrical discharge over your spiritual sinoatrial node to stop the tremor, reset your system, and force your heart to beat with the brutal, icy, and lethal slowness of the immortals. This reset is not a suggestion, it is a vital necessity to reclaim the throne of your own physical and mental space. The incision, the necessary cut. In emergency rooms, when a patient enters with supraventricular tachycardia or fibrillation that threatens to destroy their heart muscle in minutes, doctors do not prescribe herbal teas. They execute shock maneuvers. If the patient is stable, they apply what are known as vagal maneuvers. They force the patient to strain. Or they apply extreme pressure to specific arteries to stimulate the vagus nerve, the master cable of the parasympathetic nervous system, whose function is to hit the heart with a chemical hammer to stop it in its tracks. If this fails, the surgeon uses the defibrillator. He stops the heart for a fraction of a second. Through a discharge of thousands of volts, he silences the electrical chaos to allow the natural rhythm, heavy and slow, to take control again. In the operating table of your own psyche, the surgical intervention you must apply to cure your existential arrhythmia is called the cardiac brake or the defibrillator of will. You will be the cardiologist of your own crisis. The incision consists of an act of mechanical violence against your own reptilian survival instincts. The next time chaos breaks out around you, the next time bad news knocks on your door, or a family urgency claims your attention, you will refuse to accelerate. You will apply the emergency brake. The execution of this cut in real life demands a level of stoicism that freezes the blood of those who observe it. Imagine your home enters panic. A financial disaster becomes evident, a minor accident scares the family, or a shouting argument breaks out in the living room. The biological instinct of the biomass, your own diseased tissue, will inject you with adrenaline. Your pupils will dilate. Your breathing will become shallow. Your heart will try to jump out of your chest so that you run, speak fast, shout orders, and join the theater of panic. You must resist this urge. It is in that exact millisecond where you will apply the electrodes to your own chest. You will close your eyes for an instant. You will force your legs to root into the ground or drop with all your weight into the back of your chair. You will take manual control of your diaphragm and dominate the rhythm. Inhale the air slowly, counting to 5, and inflate the abdomen, sending a mechanical signal to the vagus nerve. And while others run and scream, you will force yourself to exhale even more slowly. You will feel the pain of suppressed instinct. You will feel that immobility is counterproductive. The voice of fear will tell you, do something, move fast, time is running out. You will murder that voice. You will execute the cut. There is no urgency that justifies the loss of my sovereignty. If the world burns, it will burn at my rhythm. This is the cold steel of your new internal hierarchy. The cardiac brake requires that you slow down each and every one of your motor movements in the moment of greatest crisis. If they bring you an urgent paper to sign, take it with exasperating slowness. Read it slowly. If they ask you a question loaded with panic, do not answer immediately. Let the silence fall like a lead curtain. Turn your head toward the interlocutor with the heaviness of a bank vault door opening. By forcing your body to move in slow motion during a crisis, you are hacking your own cardiovascular system. You are proving that your intellect is superior to the chemistry of fear. At first, this surgery is torture. You will feel the electrical tension of unconsumed adrenaline burning your muscles. But if you do not yield, if you keep the cardiac brake pressed all the way, the clinical miracle will occur. Your soul's sinoatrial node will capitulate. The heart will stop trembling. The rhythm will fall back to 50 beats per minute. Panic will disintegrate in the vacuum of your own slowness. And in the clean space left by annihilated tachycardia, the supreme organ will be installed, the rhythmic motor that will dominate not only your own body, but the time of everyone around you. The eternal organ, the transmutation. When the fibrillation of haste has been electrocuted and the cardiac brake has managed to subject the rhythm of biology to the dictatorship of will, The patient's thorax experiences a metamorphosis that elevates them above the fragile human condition. The heart muscle transmutes into astronomical machinery. To this new implant, this unshakable pump of blood and time, we shall call the metronome of the universe or the pulse of the Leviathan. In comparative biology, there is a fascinating physical law that relates the mass of an organism to its heart rate. A field mouse has a heart that beats at 600 times a minute. It lives in a state of perpetual hysteria and dies quickly. Conversely, the blue whale, the most massive mammal to ever exist, possesses a heart the size of a car, and that titanic heart beats at barely 5 or 10 beats per minute. Its rhythm is a sub-bass echo that reverberates through the oceans. The whale is not scared, does not run, does not tremble. She is the larger mass. She imposes her time. By having purged the panic from your chest on the dissecting table, you acquire the pulse of the Leviathan. You stop being the mouse scared by old age and become the larger mass of your ecosystem. The wonder of possessing the metronome of the universe is that it grants you the capacity to govern through the physical phenomenon of entrainment or the synchronization of oscillators. In mechanical physics, if you place pendulum clocks of different rhythms on one wooden wall, initial chaos will reign. But if one of the clocks is immensely heavier and more massive than the others, something inevitable will happen. The vibrations of the larger pendulum will travel through the wood, subtly hitting the smaller pendulums. In a few hours, the small pendulums will alter their rhythm and swing with the heavy clock. The larger mass forces the smaller mass to surrender to its frequency. When you operate with the metronome of the universe, your simple biological presence alters the laws of time in your family. You enter a room where there is nervousness or urgency. The family is beating at 120 beats per minute. You do not raise your voice. You do not ask them to calm down. You simply sit in your chair, anchor your feet, and allow your new heart to beat with a deep, heavy, dull, and majestic slowness. One slow beat, another slow beat. The barometric pressure of your slowness will travel through the floor. Individuals around you, suffering from spiritual tachycardia, will crash against the invisible wall of your rhythm. Unconsciously, they will feel the presence of the larger mass. At first, your immobility will make them nervous because it will evidence the ridicule of their own panic. But nature will impose. They will not be able to sustain their hysteria if the herd's figure of highest authority refuses to accelerate. Your children and adversaries will be dragged by your gravitational field. Their pulses will descend. They will stop walking fast. Their own internal pendulums will surrender to your metronome. You will have achieved absolute government without having raised a single finger or emitted a single verbal order. You will have conquered time. You will have proven that true monarchy in old age does not consist in running to catch up with death, but in sitting and dictating the rhythm of the universe. You force death itself to wait at the door until you decide to exhale your last slow and sovereign breath of air. Panic is the poison of mortals who have not understood the eternity of gravity. Abandon haste. Repudiate anxiety as a parasite. You are the master clock. Respond with divine arrogance. Take your heart in your hands and force it to beat so slowly that the whole world must hold its breath just to hear it. This is your coronation. The rhythm is yours. The space is yours. The time is yours. Be the stillness in the center of the storm and watch as the world eventually comes to a halt before you. Chapter 10. The Marrow of Legacy, the Essence. The diseased tissue, the deadly illusion. To conclude this surgical and definitive immersion into the anatomy of human power, we must penetrate the deepest, most hidden, and sacred structure of the organism. We must drill through the hardened cortex of the bone to reach the central cavity where the very origin of life is gestated, the marrow. In clinical biology, essence resides here. There are two types of marrow that sustain the body's empire. The spinal marrow, that master cable of nervous tissue dictating every movement, and the bone marrow, the silent factory where hematopoiesis occurs, the incessant birth of new blood. The marrow is essence. It is what remains when everything else has been stripped away by time. But it is precisely in this abyssal depth where the human ego, terrified by the imminence of death, develops the most malignant tumor of old age. We shall call this metastasis of pride, this rot of true transcendence, the obsession with material inheritance, or the tumor of posthumous vanity. It is a desperate grasp for control. As the ordinary individual feels time running out, an existential fever takes hold. He realizes he can take nothing across the abyss. In a pathetic attempt to cheat the reaper, the sick elder concentrates his vital energy on the distribution of inorganic matter. He measures success by weighing gold and counting square meters. Observe the spiritual misery of these individuals. They spend their last years obsessed with deeds, jewelry, and cash. They believe, with a truly astonishing clinical blindness, that leaving a fortune is proof of greatness. They use the will as a whip and a chain, threatening disinheritance or promising riches to buy affection. This is the deadly illusion, the blasphemy of believing that gold can forge the character of new blood, or that bricks constitute an eternal legacy. Nature laughs at this vanity. The biological wear produced by this obsession causes the worst family tragedies. When legacy is built on money, you inject poison into the lineage. What happens when the testator dies and the will is opened? The heir biomass, not educated in discipline or honor, pounces on the remains like hyenas on a carcass. Siblings betray each other for a plot of land. Families disintegrate in courtrooms. The money accumulated with blood and sweat becomes the tool for their destruction. By leaving weakness covered in gold, the sick elder has not built an empire, he has financed a cemetery. He has forgotten the most basic thermodynamic law. Inherited material comfort without the spiritual temper to sustain it is a death sentence. It is the slow, gilded erosion of the soul across generations. Posthumous vanity is the childish desire for our name to be carved in marble. But time is a relentless acid. Statues erode. Fortunes are squandered by the third generation. Names are forgotten. He who spends his autumn amassing wealth to be remembered dies with empty marrow, a mere ATM for an impatient offspring. If you desire your passage to have geological weight, you must return one last time to the dissecting table. We must open the spinal column of your intentions. We must extirpate the tumor of material legacy, amputate the need to be idolized, and purify the marrow of your bones so your legacy is moral perfection. The incision, the necessary cut. In oncological neurosurgery, when a tumor is lodged in the spinal marrow, the surgeon faces medicine's most terrifying challenge. A millimeter of error, and the patient may be paralyzed for life. To extirpate it, the surgeon must open the vertebrae, exposing the naked and vulnerable marrow to cut the dark mass with precision. In the dissecting table of your spirit, the final surgical intervention to cure the vanity of legacy is named the amputation of the name, or the acceptance of oblivion. You will be the surgeon operating on your own historical pride. The incision is an act of voluntary psychological annihilation. Destroy the fantasy. You must consciously destroy the fantasy that you will be remembered or thanked by coming generations. You must extirpate the need for your lineage to erect a monument in their hearts. This cut requires you to lock yourself in the loneliest chamber of your conscience and face the chronological reality of the universe. In 200 years, no one will know the tone of your voice. No one will remember the battles you fought in silence to keep your family afloat. Your great-grandchildren might see a dusty photograph of you and feel absolutely nothing. The animal instinct, the tumor of vanity, will scream in pain at this thought. It will writhe, demanding transcendence. It will tell you, if they forget me, nothing I did mattered. I have to leave more money so they remember me. It is in that millisecond of existential terror where you must plunge the scalpel to the very bottom. Cut the nerve of vanity and bleed the ego dry. Look in the mirror and pronounce the sentence that seals the incision. I assume oblivion. My name will be erased by the wind. My houses will be inhabited by strangers. My money will scatter. I renounce the applause of future ghosts. My work was not made to buy memory, but to justify my own sovereignty now. The amputation of the name means ceasing to use your will or wealth as a weapon of emotional extortion. If you leave goods to your children, do it with the coldness of one handing over a tool, not the manipulation of one demanding devotion. Refuse to collect gratitude debts. The monarch does not beg for thanks. By executing this neurosurgery, you will feel the vertigo of ego annihilation. You will feel stripped of future identity, but the pain of this incision is the exact price of absolute freedom. When you accept that you will be forgotten, you are liberated from humanity's heaviest burden. You no longer act for the gallery. You no longer measure decisions by how they affect your posthumous image. You experience a brutal purification. You become conscious matter, an organism that has stopped being dragged by the terror of disappearing. You become the creator of your own gravity. Conscious matter needs no mirrors or applause. It suffices unto itself, knowing its limits and governing itself absolutely within them. By extirpating the tumor of posthumous vanity, you clean the marrow, preparing it for the secretion of the only substance that the universe is incapable of destroying. You are preparing the ground for an eternal signal, the eternal organ, the transmutation. When the marrow has been purged and the obsession with material legacy amputated, the spinal cavity of the monarch experiences definitive transmutation. The vacuum does not remain inert. The stem cells of your own spirit multiply and secrete a new substance. This is the marrow of the invisible legacy. In genetics, DNA does not transmit bank accounts or luxury cars. DNA transmits the architecture of the organism, the predisposition to resistance, and the strength of the immune system. DNA is a code of pure, silent, and indestructible information traveling through the abyss of generations. It is data. The marrow of the invisible legacy operates on this same principle. It is the absolute understanding that the only true legacy is not what you give into their hands, but what you engrave in their bones through relentless example. Being endowed with this eternal organ, your conception of inheritance transmutes. You stop worrying about leaving an easy path for your descendants. You realize that leaving an easy path is an act of biological cruelty, for it leaves them defenseless against the wolves. The monarch does not inherit comforts. The monarch inherits postures. He inherits the architecture of a soul prepared for war. How is this invisible legacy transferred? It is transferred through the constant radiation of your own perfect chord. When you demonstrate a brutal coherence between what you think, say, and do. When you refuse to kneel before pain. When you keep a leaden silence before insults, you rewrite the genetic code. You rewrite the spiritual genetic code of all who observe you. The biomass around you may not understand you today. They may rebel against your coldness. They may call you hard. But the human mind absorbs the example with unconscious veracity. Decades after your body is dust, the miracle will occur. One of your descendants, who will not even remember your face, will face ruin or unbearable tragedy. In that moment of absolute darkness, when animal instinct asks that descendant to surrender or betray their principles, something in the depth of their own bone marrow will activate. A signal will trigger. They will feel an inexplicable force, an instinct of rectitude they learned at no school. Automatically, their back will straighten, their breath will become slow, their jaw will tighten, and instead of giving up, they will face the storm with the immobility of a stone mountain. They will stand their ground. That descendant will not know where they got that strength. They will not know that lethal dignity is your biological ghost operating through time. They will not know they are executing the same silence you executed at your table half a century ago. That is the code of the blood. That is the immortality. It resides in the thermodynamic transfer of character. You become the master beam of the psyche of your offspring. To forge this, you must become the most ruthless version of yourself today. Demand unnegotiable moral excellence from your flesh. If you show weakness now, you inject that virus into their veins. If you show the hardness of moral titanium and the stellar coldness of absolute acceptance, you are vaccinating your great-grandchildren against mediocrity. The material universe dissolves. Everything you can touch or store is condemned to entropy. Stop losing your time trying to control the uncontrollable. Abandon the bourgeois concern for the distribution of goods. The true emperor knows gold is for mercenaries. For the princes of his blood, the only worthy inheritance is the anatomical map of invulnerability. You are the source of a stream of strength that will nourish your bloodline for centuries to come. The work of dissection is finished. You have operated on your skeleton, purged your lungs, cleaned your blood, removed the cataracts from your eyes, torn the muscle of your will, cauterized your skin, mastered digestion, sectioned the nerve of possession, defibrillated your heart, and purified the marrow. The weak and scared body that lay on the surgical table no longer exists. It has been reconstructed under the laws of physics and superior discipline. What rises now is not an elder fearful of the end, but an entity forged in fire and cooled in ice. A conscious matter that breathes, observes, and dominates. The outside world remains an incomprehensible, noisy, and lethal chaos. Storms will lash the windows and fools will shout, but it no longer concerns you. You have erected an unexpugnable empire within your own flesh. Stand up, feel the crushing weight of your new design, and walk towards the rest of your days. Walk with the opaque and majestic gaze of one who has defeated death by tearing from its hands the only thing it wanted to steal, the fear of ceasing to exist. You are now the witness, the actor, and the script. You are the silence that governs the noise. You are, finally, the eternal monarch. Conclusion: the sovereign organism. The surgical intervention has concluded. The cold steel withdraws, and the aseptic lights of the operating room turn off one by one. You have voluntarily submitted yourself to the most relentless dissecting table that the human spirit can endure. You allowed the scalpel of truth to dissect your fears and amputate your attachments. You allowed it to drain the blood of your nostalgia and fracture the calcified bone of your habits. The fragile, frightened, and whining individual who lay down on this gurney 10 chapters ago no longer exists. He died in the operation, and his death is the absolute triumph of superior biology. You have been rebuilt for power. What now rises from the operating table is no longer a simple mammal adrift, a victim of time and a beggar for others' affection. What stands now is the sovereign organism, a perfect machinery forged in voluntary pain and sealed with the fire of tactical indifference. You have ceased to be reactive flesh. You have transmuted into the ultimate expression of the universe, conscious matter. An entity that knows its own weight, that understands the thermodynamic laws of external chaos, and that has decided, with majestic coldness, not to be governed by any of them. It took billions of years for the universe to cool the stars. Today, you honor that cosmic lineage by refusing to tremble before the smallness of human dramas. The sovereign organism walks the streets of a sick world without catching its hysteria. Your skeleton of moral titanium allows you to remain upright in the face of betrayal. You are the immovable point in a moving world. Your abyssal lung grants you the power to suffocate the panic of an entire room with a single slow and heavy exhalation. The plasma of the instant that now circulates through your veins makes you immune to the poisons of the past, while the eye of the witness allows you to contemplate tragedy without a single useless tear. You have mastered the digestion of misfortune, you have cut the nerves of possession, and you have forced your own heart to beat at the geological rhythm of the leviathans. You are, finally, the absolute master of your own ecosystem. The space you occupy is sacred territory, governed by laws that you alone have dictated. As you walk among your peers and your descendants, you will notice the immense abyss that now separates you. They will continue to run in circles, drowning in glasses of water, demanding that life be fair and crying when they discover it is not. They will try to drag you into their emotional mud and their neurosis. They will try to make you the sponge for their problems again, but upon looking into your eyes, they will stop dead. They will see the scaled carapace. They will feel the acoustic vacuum. They will understand, without the need for you to utter a single word, that the door of weakness has been walled up forever. Your mere presence will become a physical reminder of what true dignity means in the twilight of life. Do not deceive yourself with false illusions of eternal youth. Entropy will continue its unnegotiable course. Cellular biology dictates that the skin wrapping your new structure will eventually wither. Your joints will creak under the weight of gravity, and one day the physical heart will stop its march. The Reaper will arrive at your door, as it arrives at the door of all mortals. But the colossal difference, the astronomical distance that now separates you from the ordinary biomass, lies in how you receive it. The common elder, the one who refused to operate on his soul, will die terrified. He will die crying for what he loses, clinging to the doorframes, begging for one more day of life to continue suffering in his own mediocrity. He will be consumed by the very shadows he spent his entire existence trying to avoid. But when death approaches the sovereign organism, it will encounter an unexpugnable fortress. You will not beg for mercy. You will not look back with regret because you no longer owe anything to the past. You will receive it standing or prostrate in your bed, but with the gaze of an old eagle, serene and indecipherable. You will hand over this biological container without offering resistance, knowing that the true legacy, the code of honor, the leaden silence, and the dignity of stone has already been transferred to the marrow of your descendants. Death can only destroy what is soft. You have become something altogether different. By attempting to bite your spirit, death will break its fangs against the steel of your absolute acceptance. You are the architect of the eternal. The operation is a success. The patient is dead. Long live the monarch. Your frequency is now the frequency of the universe itself.